Hi, I'm Natasha with Cryptids, Creeps, and Conspiracy. Embark with me on a journey to uncover the details involving cryptids, haunted houses, and unsolved mysteries. Get ready to awaken your curiosity and explore the unknown. Ask questions, and together, let's unravel the secrets behind the legends.
Welcome to the D.E.A.D podcast, where I discuss all things spooky and weird. I'm Desi, and today I'll be talking about the Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Let's get started. Hey everyone, how is everyone tonight? I am doing much better than last week. I'm feeling a lot better. Hopefully my voice sounds better, and if not, I'm sorry, it's a little off. And hopefully it's not too off. And so since I'm better, tonight I am drinking a Corona, and the shirt I am wearing is a black t-shirt, and it just has in like red, it says A Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's get started. I'm going to be talking about the Countess Elizabeth Bathory and her history and what she is said to have done. Few women's crimes have resonated through history as much as those of Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Even if you are unfamiliar with the name, then chances are you have heard the stories about her legendary sadism. The story of Countess Bathory is now beyond mythic, a near fantastical fairy tale that serves as a vessel for every cautionary tale you've ever heard about evil women and their soul-sucking vanities. Bathory was a vampire, a torturer, a creature beyond human who bathed in the blood of innocents to maintain her looks. As is typically the case, the truth behind the story is far more interesting. Countess Bathory was a wealthy and powerful Hungarian noblewoman, the daughter of Baron George VI Bathory and Baroness Anne Bathory, whose relations included an uncle who was King of Poland and a nephew who was Prince of Transylvania. This bloodline was also one of generational inbreeding. Her parents were close relations, as was often the case with such marriages. It is thought that this may have been the source of a number of health problems that Elizabeth experienced as a child. She suffered from severe epileptic seizures that led to an array of pseudo-quackery cures that inspired many of the most insidious stories about the Bathory vampire legend. In 1610, she was accused of gruesome acts of serial murder and confined to her home of Castle Cachetice, where she remained until her death. Bathory is reputed to have killed at least 600 victims, earning her a Guinness World Record for most prolific female murderer. Her actions resulted in a nickname of the Blood Countess, and may have been a source of inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. However, it is possible Bathory was not guilty of all the crimes that have been laid at her feet. Bathory was born in Hungary on August 7th, 1560. Because so little about Bathory's childhood can be proven with hard evidence, this is a period of her life where most of the speculation about the origins of her evil is centered. One favorite conspiracy is that her seizures were treated by rubbing the blood of a non-sufferer onto her lips or using a piece of their skull, thus igniting her insatiable bloodthirst. Another theory is that she was trained by her family to be cruel, taught witchcraft, and exposed to satanic worship. At the age of 11, Bathory, who was considered a beautiful and well-educated girl, became betrothed to Count Ferenc Nadezhdy, a nobleman and heir to one of the wealthiest dynasties in the region. Although he was technically of lower social standing than his wife-to-be, some accounts of her life include her giving birth to an illegitimate child, fathered by another man before her marriage. A 15-year-old Bathory married D.E.A.D, 19, on May 8, 1575, and Ferenc took the surname Bathory. The couple's first child was born 10 years later in 1585. Bathory gave birth to 5 children. 2 died as infants, and 2 daughters and a son survived. As her husband was a soldier who was often off fighting the Ottoman Turks, the couple spent most of their marriage apart. Elizabeth was left behind to manage the family estate, defend her husband's affairs, and tend to the local people. Often her duties included providing medical care and advice to destitute citizens. However, he may have schooled her in techniques of torture when they were together. After D.E.A.D's death in January 1604, Bathory took control of her extensive estates. Between 1602 and 1604, the rumors about Bathory's crimes became impossible for the authorities to ignore. Lutheran minister Istvan Magyari made complaints against her, both publicly and at the court of Vienna, but it took until 1610 for King Matthias II to assign 2 notaries to collect evidence on the myriad charges made against her. Bathory was accused of a haunting litany of crimes against both female servants and minor noblewomen who'd come to her for training and education. Most of her alleged assaults and murders took place after she was widowed in 1604. Girls as young as 10 were said to have been abducted by Bathory, beaten severely, and mutilated before freezing or starving to death. Some girls were allegedly burned with hot tongs. Others had parts of their faces bitten off. Some of Bathory's victims were covered with honey and left outside for insects to devour. During colder parts of the year, young women might be stripped naked and forced into deadly ice baths. Bathory sometimes tortured girls by driving needles into their fingers, cutting their noses or lips, or whipping them with stinging needles. She would bite shoulders and breasts, as well as burning the flesh, including the genitals, of some of her victims. The intimate nature of Bathory's attacks suggests a sexual motivation, though it is impossible to know with certainty what compelled her to act. Depictions of Bathory often mention her bathing in the blood of her virgin victims in an attempt to recapture her lost youth. However, this depraved action didn't shy away from the gore. The first mention of Bathory's bloodbaths came 100 years after her death, and thus seems to be an invention. On December 29th, 1610, Count Thurzo, who oversaw judicial matters as the Lord Palatine of Hungary, arrived at Bathory's castle to investigate the Countess's alleged crimes against women of noble birth. Any mistreatment of servants was not a concern to authorities. He reportedly surprised Bathory in the middle of tormenting a victim, and in response immediately imprisoned her in her home. Her high status meant she would not be jailed as a common criminal. 4 of Bathory's servants, 3 females and 1 male, were then arrested, questioned, and subjected to torture. Their court proceedings began early in January 1611. These servants denied their culpability in the murders, but admitted to burying multiple victims, though the number in their accounts varied between 36 and 51. In addition to shifting blame to their mistress and each other, they also implicated a deceased servant, Darvulia, who served as a maid and governess. 2 of the women and the male servant were sentenced to death, which was quickly carried out. The 4th was spared immediate execution. What happened to her afterwards is unknown. Another woman, who had supposedly used magic to aid Bathory, was also soon killed. After these executions, Thurzo continued to investigate the Countess. One witness stated that Bathory herself had listed 650 victims in her papers. Though the number of victims varied in other testimonials, and the Countess's exact death toll remains unknown. The evidence gathered by Thurzo also included 289 witness statements. As a member of a powerful family, Bathory was not put on trial. Instead, she was isolated, perhaps walled up, in Castle Countess, where she remained until her death on August 21st, 1614, at the age of 54. As she was not convicted of a crime, Bathory's holdings passed to family members instead of being seized. The evidence against Bathory has flaws. Of 289 witness accounts, more than 250 offered either hearsay or no information whatsoever. The testimony that Bathory had listed 650 victims was a second-hand accounting of what a court official had discovered. Yet the official who'd supposedly seen this information didn't testify. Many of the witnesses who spoke against Bathory were beholden to Thurzo, who oversaw the entire investigation, and the fact that Bathory's servants were tortured makes their confessions unreliable. To this day, the case of Elizabeth Bathory inspires rigorous debate and historical examination. Some believe that she was the victim of a politically motivated conspiracy as a means to get control over her land, and others have raised the possibility that she was targeted by the Lutheran Church because her Calvinist faith. While some of the testimonies given have fallen under scrutiny, it is hard to dispute the hard evidence of numerous bodies of dead and dying girls being found in the castle. For all of the outlandish theories and conspiratorial plotting surrounding Bathory, the truth is probably a simple one. She was a sadistic aristocrat who believed her privilege sheltered her from punishment. In many ways, it did. She got to die in her own bed with her family at home after all. Imprisonment allowed family members to take control of the powerful widow's possessions. Her sons-in-law knew beforehand that her arrest was coming. The Habsburg court owed her money they didn't want to pay, and Bathory's support of her nephew, Prince Gabor Bathory of Transylvania, who was in conflict with the ruling, potentially placed her in danger. However, it is unlikely Bathory was completely innocent. In 1602, a priest wrote a letter that discussed the excessive cruelty exhibited by Bathory and her husband towards their servants. The testimony against Bathory could have included true tales about how harshly she acted with lower classes. Such acts weren't illegal at the time. Bathory was only punished because her victims were said to have included noblewomen, but would still make Bathory responsible for many ruined lives. The body of 54-year-old Bathory was found on August 21st, 1614, in Castle Countess, located in present-day Slovakia, where she'd been imprisoned since 1610. She was initially buried in the crypt on her estate, but her body was likely moved afterward. Today you can find Elizabeth Bathory's legend throughout modern pop culture. She is a favorite character in many vampire novels, and is even a primary villain in one of the official Dracula sequels, written by Bram Stoker's great-grandnephew. She is referenced in DC Comics, The Vampire Hunter, American Horror Story, the Tekken games, and many metal songs. There is a devious charm to the myth of Bathory, a wicked temptress, more akin to a Disney villain than a real noblewoman, It is yet another way that history softens the truth because simply the real thing is too horrific to consider. Okay, so now I'm going to be talking about the ghosts of the Countess and maybe her victims. So, one property in the heart of Vienna is famed for housing ghosts of Elizabeth Bathory's past. The Countess herself supposedly lived within this property for quite some time. She traveled to Vienna to be with her husband while he studied. It is here that the Blood Countess murder rampage supposedly started. The luring of young women to this property occurred from the local market. Death and torture did not occur in this house on quite the scale it did at Countess Castle, though many still believe stains of torment have become ingrained upon the house. There have been many stories told about ghosts haunting Countess Castle in Slovakia, though the existence of Elizabeth Bathory's crimes has been debated. Many believe tormented souls haunt the area. Many people have claimed to experience paranormal activity within this stunning mountaintop ruin. Some say they have sighted shadow figures and full body apparitions. These are sometimes formed of black mist or described as transparent humans. Sometimes these appear as young girls crying, believed to be the tortured victims. The ghost of Elizabeth Bathory herself is also thought to haunt Countess Castle, where she was imprisoned and died. Many claim to have sighted her, and she is sometimes described as being faceless. In addition to these ghost apparitions appearing before people, some say they have experienced disembodied voices in and around the castle. So that is the story of the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Bathory, and her history and how she came to be. So let me know what y'all think if you've heard of her. And yeah, let me know. That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks for listening to the D.E.A.D podcast. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the D.E.A.D podcast. Also, feel free to send in your stories, episode suggestions, or feedback at the deadpodcast1 at gmail.com or send me a DM on Instagram. If you enjoyed this show, please rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on, and be sure to come back next week for my next episode.